Well, another dark log from the diary of a griever named John Weaver, which is me. What's going on, guys? Okay, it's March 23rd, Monday, and it's 3:25, or no, it's like 3:40. Oh, I'm sorry, 3:43 in the morning, West Coast time. Shout out to the artist of recovery, Darryl P. Dude, it was an interesting video that you did yesterday concerning about your wanderings of science fiction. And yes, science fiction had a lot of potential when it was being shown on television. But dude, the books out there were a lot more interesting in the 1800s. Up to, I don't know when. We were creating stuff, we were thinking about stuff. The gothic tales, the gothic monsters. Telling about our dark side. Telling us about our own psychology. Oh, the shrinks coming out of that time were having a field day over mankind's morality and their mental statuses of what this meant and what that meant. But as for science fiction trying to go to different places, Jules Verne was a good writer. He was an excellent writer. He captured a lot of people's attention. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That would have been the basis for Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Right there. But before Irwin Allen's creation that came out, and he was popping them out. He was an avid book reader and became an avid writer. You read the giants were the pioneers of the fiction of things going on. It really gets to you. It really gets your imagination firing. We look at today's science fiction, and we look at it science. And some of us, maybe a few of us, have wondered where it came from. We were already thinking about this stuff when we heard about computers and robotics. Hell, they were talking about robotics back in the ancient times, ancient Greek. Somebody was trying to make up the blueprints for that, if I'm not mistaken. But as for the computers, well, we had, Chinese doing the abacus, a few others trying to make a robot or two. Why, just mechanics only? Yeah. We were creating this kind of stuff a long time ago, but just never followed through. Only that when we were doing the World War II, if I'm not mistaken, that computers were made to calculate so many variables. There would be a warehouse full of it, just to make the variables for a lot of things. Took a lot of power, sucked up a lot of power for that. And we're not talking about just watching the Marvel movies of this time period. No. We're talking about trying to find combat strategies, trying to find things to defeat the enemy. Germany was doing it, we were doing it. Japan never did it. And in this kind of technological age, we're getting into cyberpunk. What would happen if the robots did this or robots did that? There must have been about amazing stories, 1920s or 1930s, that were coming out in the magazines and the pop a small paperback series, shove in your pocket. Murder mysteries, noir writing, a lot of literature that was coming out that the writers were going crazy over imagination. And they had the beginning writers' shoulders to stand upon, which was back in the late 1800s. And that built upon the momentum that we'd seen with a lot of monster movies that we've been watching on the television screens and movie theaters. And seeing how the cheesy effects were like. I mean, compared to now, back then, I think they were a lot cuter. Oh, yeah, a lot more. I mean, yeah, we can get the zeros and ones digits like crazy and make our science fiction realm go crazy. I mean, we've seen how it's done in this day. But back then it was making a creation and making it worthwhile. Say, flying saucers. You had garbage can lids reformatted into flying saucers, and different lighting, different shades, different metals used on it. You know, like aluminum, tin. They create these weird ass effects, or make these shiny costumes. Or worse, the rubber suits that the stunt people would use. Creature from the Black Lagoon, or creature coming from the damn depths. Oh, you gotta laugh at that stuff. But yeah, 50s was mostly about 40s and 50s was about atomics, about civil rights. No, getting to that point. But it was about patriotism, McCarthyism, Cold War, mentality. But in the 60s, we were getting more and more into civil rights and how people were being disparaged left and right. Writers like Asimov, he wrote about technical stuff. But Gene Roddenberry, the living legend in this time period, growing up in the civil rights era where he was seeing a lot of disparity, and he wanted to write something about cattle wagon train to the stars, mixed in with Captain Horatio Hornblower. Captain Horatio Hornblower, dude. The British creation for naval battles and personal triumphs. That series would fire us because of adventures he would have with countries fighting against each other. And the character of Hornblower was British. Fighting for Great Britain, or England at the time, not Great Britain, but England at the time. Fighting against the French, fighting against the Spanish. But the writer who created all of this, oh God, I'm going to get myself kicked out of this. As soon as I figure this one out, I know the writer. I just can't put him out. It's on the tip of my tongue. And he died when he was finishing his last episode, his book, incomplete. It sucked that he died in mid-stride, but his adventures brought a lot of imagination to the writers of that time period of the 1960s and 50s. 50s, we're trying to deal with the Cold War. At the 60s to the 70s, we're dealing with dealing with the cultural. And yes, Roddenberry was trying to bring out a lot of things that the censors would not talk about or allow to be talked about. Rod Serling, back in the late 50s to the 60s, he was making his shows at wild limits out there, but we also had the Twilight Zone of Rod Serling's. And he was also making his own splash out there about human rights and cultural differences and what he thought was right and wrong. It's these guys that there's other writers that build on top of them that tried to come up with the other stuff. The cyberpunk, the computers, the robots, of what their existence would be. Imagine Asimov. He wrote robot series. He was a scientist in his own right. He had doctorates. And he used his mathematics and mechanical knowledge to create the worlds and the books that we're seeing now on streaming. The Foundation series about a galactic empire decaying and has to go through a social collapse predicted by a character named Harry Seldon. And Harry Seldon created the thing called psychohistory, all coming out of Isaac Asimov's brain. Ray Bradbury thought of the other weird science fiction stuff like the Martian Chronicles. What it would have been like if we actually landed on Mars, and how would it have been like. Also created in the 1950s, 60s, of the of the Cold War era. But the Foundation series was also created during that time. And Asimov was writing even robot books, to the point where he had successors to continue his work of robots and foundations and other things. And I remember reading a lot of that material. Oh, I missed a lot of that material. I hate it when I get a lifetime of a library built up, and then life and fate. Oh, it distributes that wealth of literature knowledge throughout the universe. Damn. I grew up a sci-fi geek. I grew up with a book in my hand. Every time I kept going traveling with my family as a kid, I always had to be a book in the back pocket. I got bored, I read. I read Star Trek books. I'd read sci-fi books. I read Terry Brooks of Dungeons and Dragons and Future Earth and magic swords and magic elves and different creatures. The Shannara legacy they had. Oh my God, I read it. The shows that we would watch in the 60s, yeah. They were trying to make a point one way or another. Lost in Space, not exactly cultural, but it was cultural. 3 seasons. It still lives on today. Irwin Allen. This guy was a disaster master. He created books, but he also created movies and television series that inspired a lot of writers. Brings me back to Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, where Allen was breeding like Jules Verne, and he created Admiral Nelson on board the Seaview. But there was also the Disney aspect of it, too. Walt Disney and his imaginations of creating all these wonderful celluloid imagery, cartoon, live action. And sometimes the live actions back in the 60s were, let's see, it was World of Disney, something like that. The Sunday TV movies and TV series that we would watch. He'd write about patriotism. He would write about war, but he would also write about other things that would bring it out to us. One of the movies that he would put out into theaters, live action, I can still remember, and it's still a classic today. And he still followed along the same lines as the Giants of Darryl Allen a bit. Island at the top of the world. Oh, you're talking about adventure right there. But 20,000 leagues under the sea, and you had, oh God, Mason in there, Douglas in there, going head to head with a sea monster. Cheesy effects, but you had to love it. You're watching this stuff, you had to love it. It put you through it. Oh. Yeah, it was fun times growing up in those places. You watch these movies, your imagination was fired up. And dude, if you had Lego, if I only had my imagination and my creativity working through my fingers, and they're not working so well. Neuropathy sucks. But a long time ago, I was one of those amateur builders, creating imagination, fired by imagination from other writers, other dreamers. I grew up a Trekkie, but it was more than just being a fan of a sci-fi show. I was a fan of a genre, an ideology, of a level of thinking, of imagineering, of, yes, thinking of civil rights and of human rights. But adventure is like Hornblower. I didn't get into Hornblower until I was about in my 20s or 30s, and I got into the books. I always heard about Hornblower, so I started reading the naval novels and learned lingo like, what? Blew my mind back then. I had to tie a knot. Not to get seasick on a boat. It made me learn how to tie knots. I tried to do that when I was a kid. I've been in a few classes. I've been in the Scouts, the Weevillows. I even took a summertime church school studies. And we learned many things in there, including how to sail a boat. In order to sail a boat, you had no knots, and you had no terminology. North side, starboard side, keel, reef, many things. My mind was open. My mind was open back then. I'm seeing today that minds are not open. They are polarized. We talked about the 50s and 60s and maybe the 70s trying to bring us into different areas of science fiction. It just keeps mutating into different things altogether, dude. And yes, voyeurism seems to be the thing for people to watch on streaming services. I am not into voyeurism. Exploration, I still am. But I also think about the war situations that we have and politics that keep screwing things over. And how politics back then was described. And compared to now, it's the same. It's the same thing. What they wrote about politics a long time ago in ancient tombs and ancient works is still the same damn shit we're dealing with these days. Science fiction can wrap around it or be strangled by it. But some things have to change and grow. We have to keep changing and growing. We'll die of stagnation if we don't. There has to be imagination. There has to be continuation of it. There has to be continuing steps to go forward. If not, we'll be passing like other figures had. And if our wars actually get the best of us, we won't be remembered. Some of the stories that we got terrified of, reality checks of how powerful imagination coupled with engineering can be. We made books, magazines, films, televisions, shows to remind us of the potential, both good and bad. What we could be, what we're afraid to be, what we shouldn't have to go into, what we had to face. Each generation had to keep teaching the next generation. How far back it went, who knows? But for us knowing about publishing, we talk about the Gothic tales of our own mentality and our own morality, our own nightmares. Oh my God, Darryl. Oh my God. I feel older and I look older than Methuselah. But then again, Methuselah had lines on his face. But try the ultimate on this one. The Old Testament. Or was it the New Testament? Ezekiel comes across aliens. Or are they angels? Or are they beings of different forms and shapes? We're not talking about the guys with the wings. No, we're talking about beings with different body masses, different heads. Written in the Bible so many generations ago. As I grab you for imagination. And that being said, live long and prosper, my friend.